Hello, listener, and welcome to Book 6, Chapter 11 of Bite-Sized Tales, your audio flash fiction podcast. In today's chapter, an aging hero gets one last chance at glory, but the request comes from a most unexpected source. Veldriss's Gift, written and read by Chris Hussey. When the only sound Chestrick heard was the crackling of the fire in the hearth, he knew he had them. He waited and allowed the tension to build in the room. Then he waited a bit more for good measure. Always make them wait for 3 breaths. Then Chestrick began, making sure to add the right dramatic emphasis as he'd done so many times before. That vile wizard Veldriss raised his hands high above his head and began to mutter dark words only heard in shadows and nightmares. Desormentum ros! Desormentum ros! There were squeals of fear from some in the crowd. Those were the people who believed that he was now uttering the same horrible words. In truth, Chestrick did not really remember what words his nemesis uttered during that fateful encounter. He only remembered acting while the wizard chanted. And the fear. Chestrick remembered the fear. I knew there was little time. In fact, I feared I may already have been too late. Dark power crackled from the wizard's upraised fingers. I leapt forward as lightning crackled just overhead, striking the place where I was. Chestrick stomped his foot hard on the floor of the inn, eliciting a few more squeals, this time of surprise. I whirled to one side. Chestrick mimicked the move, his words and breath growing appropriately frantic. My mighty blade, Tentalis, leading the way. Chestrick held forth his walking stick in place of the blade. More vile lightning! He stepped to one side, shouting, And more! He moved again, another whirl, and then... His voice dropped to a whisper, and he paused. Tentalis found her mark, as she always did. Chestrick grabbed a clay flagon from a nearby table and threw it in the air. A sharp snap from his stick shattered the mug, sending shards and mead in all directions. Shouts and more squeals answered the dramatic gesture, followed by surprised laughter. Tentalis sliced through Veldriss's arm. The evil wizard fell to his knees, clutching his horrible wound, howling in pain. Chestrick clutched his right hand, hiding it from view of the crowd. Cheers and applause erupted from the crowd. Chestrick swept his gaze across the tavern's patrons, a practiced look of satisfaction on his face. He extended both arms out and took a slow bow, keeping his eyes on those assembled in the tavern. His eyes met those of the golden-haired traveler he'd spoken with earlier. Easily 10 or more years younger than him, she'd been Chestrick's best romantic prospect in some time, and he wasn't about to lose that opportunity. His gaze lingered, and he allowed a smile across his lips. He still had a story to finish first. This woman, Nayla, would have to wait. I looked down at the wizard, now a mere shell of himself, clutching what remained of his arm. I looked him in the eye and told him, Your days of terror are at an end, evil one. We will now reclaim what you have taken from us. Be gone from this place and never return. Go and climb back into the dark pit from whence you came. More cheers rose as Chestrick took another bow. A server came forth and presented Chestrick with 2 mugs, one for himself and one to replace the one broken during the show. Chestrick raised his mug, saluting the innkeeper, who answered with a smile. Good. I have earned another free night of lodging and my meals for tomorrow. Chestrick looked toward Nayla, smiled, and raised his mug once more. She returned the gesture. And if the fates are kind, perhaps I shall earn other rewards tonight as well. Chestrick took a pull from his mug as the crowd returned to their own entertainment. The inn's minstrels resumed their music. He worked through the crowd, accepting thanks and well wishes from patrons. While he was kind, Chestrick kept his gaze on the blonde traveler, his thoughts of the evening ahead getting the better of him. A whispered voice came out from the crowd. It's funny. I remember the story a bit differently. The inn was filled with noise, but Chestrick heard the words as if they were right next to him. He turned, unsure of the source, but curious. "What's the problem, hero? You cannot see me? Perhaps it would be better if I was a fearsome tavern mug." Chestrick narrowed his vision, his concern growing. A twinge of nervousness coupled with anger stirred in his gut. Sweat began to bead on his brow. The voice continued, this time toying with the aged hero. "I know. I will raise my arms in the air and summon some dreadful lightning from the depths of hell. Maybe then it will be easier to spot me, though I don't think your cane will be able to remove my other hand." Veldriss. Memories flooded back as Chestrick recognized the voice. It was rougher, a bit more haggard and aged, but he knew it. Old instincts kicked in, and Chestrick found himself moving toward a wall, the grip on his walking stick now tight. His other hand went to the hilt of the dagger at his hip, a far cry from the sword he once wielded. "No, not that way," Veldriss's whispered voice continued. But Chestrick continued to move. The voice sighed heavily, then spoke with annoyed resignation. "To your left, shitwit. I wear the faded green hood." Chestrick turned, finding his target. The wizard sat alone, a cup of wine and a plate of half-eaten food before him. Patrons milled about, oblivious to the magic Veldriss was using. With purpose, Chestrick strode forward, drawing his dagger slowly from its sheath. "No, no weapons, old man. Show some respect. I just want to talk. Surely you can grant me that courtesy. Besides, if I wanted you dead—" Chestrick reached the table, looking down at the hooded man. Veldriss returned the gaze. The wizard's face bore scars and near infinite wrinkles. Blotches of red were scattered across his face. The wizard finished his sentence. "I would have just struck you down after you finished your tale of lies." Chestrick took the seat across from his old foe. "There were no lies. Dark magic sprung forth from your hands, one of which I promptly removed." Veldriss placed both arms on the table, then with his left hand pulled the sleeve back from his right. An ornate hook rested in place of his right hand. Made of blackened iron, the hook forked in two directions, metal fingers with sharpened edges. Runes and arcane symbols etched and filled with silver covered the iron talons. "Indeed," the wizard answered, "I seem to remember striking you with that dark magic, driving you to your knees. I remember your screams of agony quite well." Veldriss covered the hook hand. "Tell me, did those scars ever heal?" Chestrick shot the spellbinder a scornful look. "They did not," he said flatly. Chestrick's tone changed to slightly more mirthful. "Thankfully, they did no damage to my face, and after a few years those scars took on their own sort of appeal, and bestowed their own sort of benefits." He stole a glance to Nayla, the blonde-haired traveler, who was now engaged in conversation with another patron. Chestrick frowned at the lost opportunity. "Yes, I'm sure. My wife once had a special fondness for a scar or two." Veldriss noticed the woman and the man she spoke to. "I'm sorry I ruined your chances to not be alone this evening. Perhaps you will just have to settle on me." "I would prefer it if you were dead," Chestrick shot back. Veldriss sighed. "I once felt as you did, you know." He raised his clawed arm. "For many years after this happened, I was consumed with anger and vengeance towards you. My anger only grew when I was unable to do anything about it." He lowered his arm. "But I have learned to let go." Veldriss paused. "It appears you have not." It was Chestrick's turn to sigh. "Oh, I suppose I have. I may have answered out of reflex. I will confess I was quite surprised to hear your voice, and perhaps a twinge of fear. I thought I may have been imagining things, hearing old ghosts. I thought you had died." Chestrick leaned in. "And judging by the appearance of your face, it appears that perhaps you did ascend to the afterlife, but have not yet realized it." You do not look as you once did. Veldriss looked away. In many ways I did perish after that woeful day, or return to that dark pit from whence I came, as you put it. Veldriss looked about the inn and its patrons. It appears, however, that I was not the only one who fell from their once powerful glory. This looks nothing like the royal halls and comfortable villas where you once were a guest of honor. It brings me a small amount of satisfaction to see that I was not the only one who has seen suffering. Chestrick looked down at his tankard and spoke with resignation after some time. The years could have been kinder. I may have been a hero, but I was far from perfect. Veldriss smiled. Such a surprising confession from the once great Chestrick, the hero of the city of spires, luminary of the Northern Star, and champion of the Drake's Teeth Mountains. Short of killing children or perhaps cursing the great god Uldrine, I cannot imagine what you could have done to fall so far as to be traveling from town to town, living off the glory of your past for a meal, a bed, and the occasional woman for a night's comfort. The wizard leaned in. If not for my own suffering, I might say that in the end, it is I who was victorious. The aged hero looked up from his drink, his face stony and stern. Is there a point to all this? You have seen me here, called out my folly, and now we sit across from one another, two broken foes in the winter of our lives. What is it that you want of me, Veldriss? The wizard lost the smile in his face, returning Chestrick's blank stare. I will confess that I had no inkling that you were in this town, much less this very inn. Veldriss licked his wrinkled lips. But now that I have found you, perhaps it is the fates giving us both a chance at redemption. One final gift. You can be the saving hero, and I shall save the one thing that matters to me in what remains of my miserable life. Chestrick twisted his mouth in confusion. What are you talking about? A saving hero? And what could you possibly love but your own selfish quest for power and control? My daughter, Veldriss answered, regret lacing his voice. Chestrick sat stunned, staring at his old nemesis. Silence hung between the two, while the inn's patrons continued about their nightly rituals, oblivious to the company they shared. Chestrick finally spoke. I had no idea that you had a daughter. Has it always been so? Veldriss nodded. Yes. She was but a child when we last met. Veldriss massaged the base of his hook hand, the product of poor judgment with one of my apprentices at the time. I wanted nothing to do with her or her mother. My selfish quest for power, as you put it, blinded me to everything else. It wasn't until after the defeat at the edge of your blade that I soon learned what truly matters in this life. I sought her out, but my search proved futile for some time. When I finally did locate her, her mother forbade me to see her. A potent spellcaster in her own right, my former apprentice wanted nothing to do with her old master. I could not blame her. Veldriss shifted uncomfortably in his seat, taking a sip of his wine. Through other means, I was able to reach her, but that too proved to be fraught with its own dangers. By the time I was able to speak to her, Veldriss paused as he seemed to consider his words with care. I tried to make a connection with my daughter, to tell her who I was, and perhaps even guide her, prevent her from making some of the mistakes I once did. Chestrick scoffed. Some? There were many, if you ask me. I did not ask you, and keep your judgments to yourself, Veldriss shot back. Alas, my words and my likely appearance pushed her away, and now I feel I may be too late. Too late for what? Chestrick asked. Veldriss's voice was strained. To save her. Chestrick looked confused. From what? Has she been taken? Veldriss reined in his emotions and shook his head. No, not in the way that you imply. I have divined that not only has she come across old notes and records of mine, she is setting down the same path I did so many years ago, a path she is not ready to embrace, much less understand. I need to reach her. To stop her, Chestrick added. For a time, at least. My daughter has the gift. She has it within her to be a great wizard one day, but she is pursuing that power in a way much as I once did. She lacks the proper discipline to manage it. If she engages in the rituals and incantations found within my old journals without that discipline, without my guidance, she could bring about forces and beings she cannot hope to control. But you still want her to possess such power? Veldriss nodded. Of course, you fool. She is my daughter. It is the... Chestrick cut the wizard off. Your possession of that power ended poorly for you. It corrupted you, turning you power-hungry and mad. No one should have such power. Veldriss held up his good hand in surrender. I will admit there were mistakes I made so many years ago, but I learned from them. I realized too late what I should have done. I wish to spare her of that. You call the death of so many innocents by your hands mere mistakes? You are still blind to the evil you have done, even now, after all this time. Chestrick's voice was growing louder, causing heads to turn. Veldriss leaned in and lowered his voice. I did not call you over here to debate my past. What I have done is not up for discussion. Certainly not now. We are talking about saving the only thing I have left in what remains of my life. I planned to seek out a sellsword or two to assist me, but when I saw you, I presumed your skill with a sword was still just as strong. Plus, it amused me to see you after all this time, the mighty hero always ready to save those in need. I thought that perhaps my only child would merit such saving. Perhaps I have misjudged. Veldriss slid his chair back and stood. He started to move past the aged hero. Wait. Chestrick grabbed Veldriss's arm. The wizard looked down at his old foe. What is it? Chestrick spoke hesitantly. I will help you. But you must promise me that you will not let her become like you once were. I will not be a party to evil. Veldriss paused, then slowly pulled his arm free. If we do not save her, she will become far worse than I ever could have been. The wizard scanned the crowd of the inn, his eyes finding the blonde traveler Chestrick had eyed earlier. He raised his good hand and uttered a small phrase under his breath. The man speaking to Nayla abruptly stood, making for the exit. Meet me outside the inn an hour after the sun rises. You may now continue the pursuit of your female prey. Scorn laced Veldriss's words. I would hate to deny the great hero of his prize. Author's note. So this story is actually considerably longer than what has originally written, and it appeared in a short story anthology called Sojourn, put out by the podcast Fear the Boot a number of years ago. At least I believe it was Sojourn. It's been quite a while. It could have been the second one that they had put out. Anyway, point being, I liked the story a lot, and I wanted to expose it to a new audience so many years later. Obviously, being a flash fiction podcast, it can't be that long. But I realized that essentially Act 1 of this story, in and of itself, is interesting enough as flash fiction. Of course, with things I've done in the past, I'm more than happy to do the other parts if the desire is there. I felt that as a whole, the thrust of this story still worked and still told and got across the point that I wanted to get across. Plus, presenting the concept of an aging hero and an aging villain once again reuniting so many years later, to me is a neat concept. I hope you enjoyed it. This chapter of Bite-Sized Tales has been brought to you under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music is Fantasy Motion by Alexander Nakarada. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we greatly appreciate reviews and recommendations to your friends. For more information about our authors, please visit bitesizedtales.com or follow us on Instagram at bite_size_tales or on Blue Sky at bitesizedtales.bsky.social. We look forward to reading to you next time.